Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk More on Monday. I'm your podcast host, Chloe, and I'm so excited to be starting a series on Women's History Month that we are celebrating here at More. We very much value women and uplifting their voices in all sectors, so I am joined each week by somebody different to talk about what they do, why they're passionate about it, and the women that inspired them to become who they are today. So thank you for joining us for this podcast. I am joined today by Sophie Haydar. So, hi, Sophie. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, pleasure to be here. My name is Sophie. I work at Counterpart, which is a small software consulting company. And one of my coworkers actually has a magazine and this podcast with you. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm a UX UI designer. I graduated from college about a year and a half ago, and this is my first job right out of college, and I'm loving it so far. So, yeah.
That's so awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Gosh, Ariana has made so many wonderful connections for us, and it just helps that you guys happen to be coworkers. So,
Yes.
shout out
Yeah,
to her.
great.
Um, and I will admit, there was a moment recently where I was like, "Hey, Ariana, what is UX/UI?" And she was like, "Let me tell you all about it, girl."
Very
So,
common question.
yeah, for our listeners that maybe don't know what it is, do you mind telling us?
I would love to. So, UX, UI stands for user experience and user interface. So, those are kind of the 2 components that go into designing any app or website that you may use. So, the user experience is more the flow of things, the workflows, how easy it is to use something, how clear the text is, just the overall usability and accessibility of the site or app. And then the user interface is more the kind of fun designy stuff with the colors and the fonts, font sizes. They're kind of two different worlds that make up an app or a website, and it's all about trying to design for user needs and expectations instead of just building technology that accomplishes one goal for, just one kind of person in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I understand about Counterpart, you guys build technology very specifically to the people that you are working with to accomplish whatever goal they may have. So that can look like a lot of different things. So I'm sure that you kind of got to stay on your toes in terms of design.
Absolutely, and one of my favorite parts about Counterpart and what drew me to them immediately is that they're design first.
Mm.
So, the design, the workflow, how it looks, how accomplish a task is all determined right up front. There are other places where they really just want to get right into building it out, have the more nerdy developers get in there and start building out infrastructure, and we need like a button here and data here and whatnot. And then they'll bring in the designers after, which can get kind of messy and mess with our workflow of things of how we create an app or a website. So at Counterpart, I love that we're always thinking about the user first, thinking about the end experience first. And it's sort of my job and the other designer's job to balance the business rules, and then also advocate for the users themselves. We're basically their voice in the room saying, hey, this is going to be super confusing to someone, or hey, this would be a really great experience if we could do it this way. So we're constantly problem solving and trying to balance different needs and rules.
Yeah. So let's circle back a bit on our Women's History Month theme and just talking about women in general. Are there any female figures, either past or that you're working with in the present, who have inspired you in your career, either within the user experience, user interface world, or in other related fields? And how have those contributions shaped your perspective and approach to design?
Yeah, so I was actually talking to someone about this earlier today, and with Ariana, and she was telling me about one of the questions that you might be asking, and I was thinking, well, when I think back to like how I was introduced to technology and who I was introduced to it by, it was mostly men and having, like, male professors and just men talking about technology, and I don't think it was until, like, the latter part of college and then after college when I started getting involved in, like, design organizations to where I really started to connect with other women, and kind of from the environments that I've been in, it seems to be, like, a bit women dominated, which I love, and I think is really cool that, you know, because a lot of other tech fields tend to be male dominated, and so it's nice to have, like, this kind of corner for ourselves where we don't have to do all that work to, prove ourselves, and we're just kind of here and killing it.
Right.
Um, so but yeah, so as I've, found my own part in the design community, whether it's been like other designers that I graduated with that I've been able to find community with and stay in touch with, or one of the organizations that I'm a part of, Indy Design Week. They work all year round to gather the design community, but they put on a conference every spring. And so before I landed my first job, I went to the conference and just found community with so many great people in different kinds of design disciplines. And yeah, once again, it was just like being surrounded by women or just other people who could relate to the struggles and the triumphs of being a designer. And yeah, those girls that I graduated with and the women that I've met in this community, it's really just so amazing to talk to one another and have the shared design language. And I think we also share a very unique love and empathy for, users and the struggles of using technology and the exciting parts about using technology. We're just all so passionate. Like, I've never met a designer that is kind of just blasé about design.
Right.
They're like, "Yeah, it's cool, whatever." No, we're all, like, such nerds about it in the best way, so,
That's
yeah.
cool. That's how you know you found your people.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
So, was there a moment in your, primary education or when you were getting close to college age when you were like, "This is what I wanna do, like, I know that, I've been inspired." What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, so my story is a little bit different. So I've always been like very creative minded, creatively oriented, and had creative hobbies, but I was kind of pushed into a more technical route as I was finishing up high school and deciding on my major for college. So I started out on the other side of technology development, which is the um, more computer science, all the complicated back end kind of stuff. And after a year of majoring in computer science, I was like, I cannot do this anymore because there's only one right answer to everything, or you can do it in different ways, but they're always looking for the same answer. It needs to work like this, the output has to be this. And I found myself just struggling to I don't know, I just felt like I didn't have the mental structure to thrive in that major,
Yeah.
so I went to my advisor and I was like, "Girl, I'm struggling, like, I can't do this anymore." And she just so happened to talk to me about UX design, and I started talking to the professors, and I was so inspired by them. They were, again, just, like, super passionate about design and people and how they intersect and how, we can advocate for different people's needs. I mean, think about how much technology you use on a daily basis and
Yeah.
how important it is that it works and works well, and that you don't get frustrated halfway through and give up. Like, tax season is coming up, TurboTax, I have mixed feelings about them every time I have to pay to do my taxes, but I will say, like, their user experience is pretty great. They
It
walk you
is.
through it, they explain everything.
They
So
even have little encouraging messages through the way.
yes,
They're like, "Don't give up, you're doing great." I'm like, "Thank you."
I know, right? And those little elements are so fun. So, yeah, I just discovered that there's a whole discipline out there that's just in charge of doing those, like, very fun, helpful things, and just that creative element. There's still a technical element. And yeah, I just started learning more and more. And I really just fell in love with it. And I switched my major. And ever since then, my college experience was like incredible. I
I
also
love
stopped having exams. We had projects instead, which I loved.
love
It
that.
works with my brain much better, so
Yeah.
yeah. So everyone in that major, all my professors, like, I still think of things that we talked about, like, on a weekly basis when I'm working on things, so
Yeah.
yeah, it was a long way to get there, but I'm so happy with where I ended up. I'm so glad I'm not a developer. Love them
Yes.
though because they implement my designs, so
Right. We do appreciate, but, everybody's twisted in a certain direction. You just gotta find out
exactly.
which way works for you.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've talked a lot about how user experience and user interface is, about understanding the user's needs and making it work for them where they are at the time. Do you think that there are unique perspectives or approaches that women bring to this process? And how can those be better valued and incorporated into design practices?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because, again, I've noticed that at least in my courses and at some of the events I go to, it seems to be like majority women. And when I think about why that is, I think it's because we're naturally inclined to think of others, to have
Mhm.
empathy for others, to take others' needs into consideration. We're naturally put into caretaking roles at a young age or even as we grow older. Um, you talk of like motherly instinct, when people are, having kids and stuff like that. And I feel like there is something there about women just having the capacity to care for other people and always bring other people's needs into the conversation. And that's not to say that men are not capable of doing that, like, I'm not saying that at all. I just think I've noticed, like, a very natural inclination towards caring for others, and it's really, important for us to be, like, advocates for other people in our lives, and I feel like as a designer, that's exactly what you're doing every single day, and yeah, I feel like as women, we're well positioned to think in that way. And then the creativity element of it too, I think is really interesting for, you know, the intersection of creativity and also like caring for others.
Yeah, I agree. I think I can't cite any specific like scientific study, but I do think that in terms of like left brain versus right brain leanings, women just tend to be more on that creative side. Like, of
Yeah,
course, that there are exceptions to the rule, but typically it seems like we're just kind of twisted to consider, all of the angles, like look at things from a big picture perspective, and that really helps with design, obviously. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
feel
absolutely.
like you are supported at Counterpart in terms of like sharing those perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that struck me like in my first month of being there was just being called upon to speak on the user's behalf. Like, what do you think they would like? Or, constantly being brought into the conversation when we're talking about how we structure things or how something's going to work or, how do we think people will use something and just always being like given the opportunity to share my thoughts and speak on my perspective of how the end experience is going to be. Or even just, like, considering people's needs. I'm not always called upon in meetings or whatever, but there are times where something triggers in my brain. I'm like, "I just know that's gonna be confusing for someone," or, "I just know that this not might not be, like, the most human design."
Yeah.
So and I feel comfortable to speak up without being called upon because of those first few months where I was a little more timid, and they said, like, "Hey, Sophie, what do you think? Like, from a design perspective, what's your take?" And being given that opportunity to speak multiple times really encouraged me to just continue to be that voice in the room for the other people who aren't in the room with us. So I feel like not only design, but designers' voices have been very like nurtured at the company. And yeah, just straight away, I could tell how much they value our thoughts and opinions. And I even remember in one of my first project kickoffs, we were working with an outside developer from the client who was trying to like skip the design process. And they were like, I just want to get this developed. We can do the design part later. And, my boss, Jason, was so great about he really backed us up, like, he was like, "No, like, we do design first, and we do it because the end product is better, and it makes all of the other parts fall into place," and just watching him kind of, like, fight that battle for me, like, in that first kickoff meeting, I was like, "Wow, I am in a really special environment right now. I feel so valued." So, yeah, I could speak forever about how Counterpart just really nurtures designers and design thinking. So, I love
That's
that.
so great.
Yeah.
I'm glad that, there are advocates there, and I can see how you would be like, "Listen, I really just need to get this going, like, let's just crank something out," but
Yeah.
it's gonna cost you in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's always nice to, advocate for yourself and, speak up when you need to, but to have someone else who's in a different role in the room also see your value and speak to your value in front of other people is always just like really incredible. So,
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We are going to wrap up this episode of Let's Talk More on Monday. But if you are listening to this and you want to hear more from Sophie, we're going to talk more about how technology inspires her and her experiences, and maybe a little advice for people that want to get into this sector. So make sure that you go join us on our Patreon and save a seat with us. If you do that, you are helping us make opportunities reachable for everyone and supporting our internship program, which is very near and dear to our hearts. But Sophie, before we go, is there anything that you want to plug? Any ways that our listeners can find you if they're interested?
Yes, you can always find me on my LinkedIn. It's just my first name and last name, Sophie Haydar. And then I also definitely want to plug Indy Design Week. Their week-long conference is coming up in late April. And it's just always such a fun amalgamation of creative events. Um, and yeah, I highly recommend for anyone who is interested in design, who is a designer, or even if you're not a designer and you just love creativity. The theme this year is hues, so it's gonna be very colorful, and it
Nice.
takes place all across downtown Indy, so it's a great way to explore downtown and meet other really fun, creative people. Highly recommend.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you guys for listening to this episode. Make sure to share it with a friend. And we will see you next week when we are joined by another woman who's going to talk about what inspires her. So thanks so much, Sophie. We'll see you over on our Patreon.
Thanks, Chloe.
Bye bye.
Bye.